and welcome! Today I'll be making a custom doll of one of my characters, and I will be using this Generation 3 Draculaura doll as a base. I've already prepped her body by sanding her down, including the seam lines and the molded on underwear. Then using 100% acetone, we can remove the factory paint. I then use Epoxy Sculpt to sculpt on all her scales. I unfortunately lost the footage of me sculpting on a lot of her body scales. I was having issues with the consistency of my epoxy where it would almost like melt off her body. It just wouldn't dry. But I had problems with it just being absolutely too goopy and then too brittle. So unfortunately her body started looking a little muddy. I cover portions of her body with the epoxy and then wait for them to dry and then begin to carve into them. Since she has a very asymmetrical look to her, I just kind of had fun with the placements of them. Some of her scales I would actually just crack off her body and then crack in half and then glue them back on. Since I didn't record the body epoxy carving, I used this method of chiseling away the corners to make them more smooth. This is actually my first custom, so apologies if not every step is recorded. I definitely went through a lot of trial and error during this, which is bound to happen since I'm new to it. But I definitely had a lot of fun with it, and I'm really happy that I got to learn what I learned. I didn't actually record this step, but for her horns I actually poked in armature wire and then used epoxy to sculpt, and then when it was at least a few hours cured, I was able to carve into them. For the tail tip, I sculpt it out of epoxy, wait for it to cure, and begin to carve. Drill in a base for the tail. For her tail, I actually tried several methods of trying to make pinch pots out of either air dry clay or epoxy, but it all just kind of resulted in crumbly little pieces that wouldn't hold. So I decided to use these little beads with elastic. I primed the doll with Vallejo primer and paint on a periwinkle skin tone. I then used soft pastels to add some body blushing. Her hands actually broke when I went to reattach them, so that's an easy fix. You can get a pin, poke it through, and then cut off the excess, and then glue. Ta-da! They work! Painting on multiple layers of white to build up the opacity for her scales. I then covered the white with a more natural bone color, accenting with watercolor pencil and pastels. So before even starting my own doll, I remember coming across other artist channels where they mentioned 𝗠𝗲𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁 head shrinking technique, which I followed to shrink Anvura's head here. So this is actually smaller than the original doll size. I will leave a link in the description if you want to check it out. It's honestly a great tutorial, and I quite like it because I really wanted a more proportional head for this character. So unfortunately I didn't record my own process of it, but it also makes the vinyl on the head a little harder. So personally I found it was much easier to draw on for the face up. For the face up, I'll be spraying a layer of Mr. Super Clear, and then I go in with a watercolor pencil to block out her eyes, her eyebrows, even her lip shape. After every so often, I'll spray again with Mr. Super Clear to kind of save my progress so then nothing smudges or smears. I also brush on some soft pastels to add some blushing to her face. I do want to make a note that this face that I'm drawing right now isn't actually the face she ends up with. I end up redoing her eyes later on to suit her personality and age a little bit more. I basically just kind of make them a little smaller, give her a little more wrinkles and some eye bags. I didn't record the process of that. It just happened on a whim. I was like, you know what? I don't like this face. We're gonna change it. But near the end of this video, right before the photo shoot, you can see a little clip of it, as well as the new face in the pictures. Though I still want to show my process of this face. The new face, I basically follow the same process of layering and spraying MSC, but I do still want to share this process of this face because I'm still proud of it and do just kind of want to show how it went. So we still built up layers with MSC and then using watercolor pencils, as well as Vallejo Acrylic paint and Gouache paint. I then begin to block in her face scales and fill them with several layers of white to build up the opacity. I then paint over the same bone white as I used on her body onto her face. Now that she's done, we will be spraying MSC to seal it all together so nothing smudges. For her hair, I am using Acrylic Yarn. I saw this technique on one of 𝗠𝗲𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁 videos. I will link up below. What I do is double the length of my doll for a single piece and then unravel it, and you get these beautiful strands with tight curls. I use a rerouting tool, which is very easy to make. Take a sewing needle and cut diagonally across the eye and then insert it into an X-Acto knife handle. When inserting her hair, you're going to follow her hairline and then the part and then fill in the rest. And then you can secure the hair inside with fabric glue. Since her head is shrunk, we're actually going to trim down the neck peg. To reattach the head, heat up the neck hole and then pop her back on. Now trimming to the length that I would like. I fold some of her hair under her horns to hide the seam. I then split her hair because I'd like to do a half up, half down look, and I tie off a 4-part braid into a tiny little bun. For her hair, I actually end up using a metal chopstick and heating it up with a flat iron and then tightly winding the yarn around the chopstick to then make a cute little curl. After curling some pieces, I end up trimming some more of the hair to give it more of a nice silhouette and some nice shape. I also do some trimming to the back as well to give it more of a nice shape instead of just one length all the way through. Pull the ends with some tweezers to give them a more natural look instead of just a blunt end. Now, same as before with the chopstick and the hot iron, we're just going to do the back of her head. Here it is all curled. For the tail, I end up treating it just how I treated the scales. I painted on several layers of white to build up the opacity, and then I cover it in a more natural bone color. For the tail, I end up putting it together with a bunch of elastics and a wire. I wanted it to work like a ball jointed doll would with the tension, but I didn't quite have the right elastic string, so I ended up just adding a wire to it to help with the flexibility and the stability of it, and honestly, it turned out really well. I then just secure it to the hole that we drilled previously with super glue, as well as the tip of the tail. Moving on to the clothes, I am using the corset pattern from the PC Ren Fair design by Requiem Art Designs. The only difference I'm adding to them is I'm adding 2 front panels to have a split down the middle so I could have a middle lace up. I then sew these pieces together and glue everything down because I wanted a very form-fitting corset. I am a beginner at making doll clothes. I tried multiple outfits and designs for this doll and just ran into so many issues of like trying to figure out how to adjust designs to her body. I know there are designs out there for the curvy Draculaura doll, and honestly I did try some of them, but because of my character's epoxy scales, she ended up a little thicker and larger in some places, and just as a beginner at making doll clothes, I found I was just running into a lot of problems, so I ended up just taking apart Draculaura's original outfit and just kind of tracing what they had, and then elongating everything so then it would be a longer blouse and a longer skirt. So here is the corset all made. Here are the two front panels I was talking about. So it'll fit on like this. I really want it to fit quite tight, and then I will figure out where the laces go after. I didn't quite like the brown that the fabric was originally, so I ended up just darkening it with gouache paint. Here's the original outfit that I took apart and then made my own patterns from and just elongated everything. This one was my first attempt, and then this one was the final result. I forgot where I saw this technique, but basically you put tinfoil on the leg first and then cover it in papier-mâché, and then you cut down the back and slide it off, and it's just a little boot. Then using fabric, I cover up the papier-mâché to give it a fabric feel and more boot-like look. I added ribbons to hide any raw edges and add shape. Using air dry clay, you could squish in the boot to make a heel. And then I unify all the colors by painting over everything in a light brown and then a dark brown to match her other accessories. I had this shiny yellow ribbon that I ended up using on several of her accessories, and I ended up actually just painting over the ribbon with a bronze gouache paint. Here they are, little boots! Boots, boots, boots! And then we're gonna accent some other accessories of hers. This old costume jewelry that I ended up taking apart and using some pieces to make some tail jewelry for her. I clip it with pliers and then put on a little chain. Adding a little details to her bun with a ribbon I painted with the bronze gouache. I do tie it in a little knot here, but off screen I actually make a little bow. For her spellbook, I ended up using Delightful's tutorial on how to make miniature doll-size hardcovers. I cover the book with some fun shapes and accents that I eventually paint with the same bronze gouache that I used for some of her other details. Ended up doing just a little bit of a rough job on the inside of the cover, so I end up just painting it with the bronze. Off screen, I do add a little strap with a buckle. The strap is just a ribbon I painted to match the cover, and then using the same costume jewelry, just use some ringlets. Now to give her spell book some spells. I'm just using watercolor pencils to fill in some of the pages and then wetting a paintbrush and actually activating them. Adding some final touches to the book, some scratches here and there, and then using some pearlescent powder. And here is her last prop. I'll be making a little arcane focus that is a bell. And as mentioned previously, here is her new face. I think it definitely suits her more. Now let's take a look. Here she is all done. Thank you so much for watching. I once again had a blast with this, and I just hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye!